Okay, so let's check this back. We'll start. Okay, let's start. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Bow our heads. Again, Father, we just pray for those people in Maui. We pray for their strengths. We pray for their safety and for their health. Let the government be willing to support them, Father. Be with the Civil Air Patrol as we do our missions. Provide our flyers with safety. And most of all, we just praise you in your glory. Amen.
Amen. All right, so a few updates before we find a subject to talk about. On aircraft side, we have 743 Charlie Papa Hub 443 fully operational. Lon, do you have any specifics to share?
Yeah, we got about 18 hours left before the oil change is due. I'm going to be flying it tomorrow. Mike Swift is going to meet me out there, and we're going to check out the hangar doors to see if they can roll back all the way, like they've said that they do. So we're going to check that out tomorrow for sure. And that Nighthawk invitation that you sent out, I might have read it wrong, but that's next Tuesday night, correct? Not the 31st?
Next Tuesday. Did I make a mistake?
I'll
have to reread it.
on there.
That's okay. I'll
Yeah,
I've got all day for
actually,
me.
I'm not gonna be here the 31st, so I don't know if it was me or you.
No, I'll fix it. Sorry about that.
Yeah, well, I'll try to make it next Tuesday night,
Yes.
but after that, then George and Mike Swift will be handling the aircraft 743 and the swap that they plan on doing and all that while I'm gone. I'll be available with on the phone and texting and email, all that stuff, but I'm going to be out of state for a month. Other than that, the airplane, I tried to schedule the window frame, and they had another higher priority, so they weren't able to do it this last week. And I've given them a text with 3 dates next week, which would be the 29th, 30th, 31st. But I didn't get a response back on whether or not they'd be able to schedule it then. So I'll try to keep following up with that and put it in to get the window frame replaced before we get it swapped out. But that'd be the best. Otherwise, since it's right here. So that's about all I got for right now on the plane.
Okay, thank you. I just checked my email and it reads August 29th.
The
Oh.
form itself.
The form itself, I clicked on a link and it shows 8/29. So
Now look at the date on there. Scroll down.
okay, yeah, see. So I forgot to edit it in one place. I'll just need to make it more generic without a date
Right.
in details. Got it, so I'll fix that. Easy fix. Thank you, Lon.
Yeah, I'm going on mute.
No worries. Okay, so a reminder to everyone online and in person, the Nighthawk will be on Tuesday. The subject of the email and the title and the questionnaire is correct. It's as usually. I'm not moving the date, time of the meeting. So if you can make it, please respond to that form. I will fix it as soon as possible. Other updates. So we have a lot of new web members helping in different roles, but one area we have neglected for some time. We need to form and make active awards committee, and most of the work in normal circumstances for awards committee is just maybe meeting regularly and presenting to the committee candidates for the awards and achievement awards and so on and so forth, and then we can submit those awards on time to the group and to the wing as applicable. So,
Well, I'm probably automatically on that because I'm group.
right, so if anyone would like to participate, it's nothing immediate because we already closed this year's submissions, to the most part anyway. So it's going to be for the next fiscal year. If you're interested, please let me know. I will gladly appoint you to that committee. We will need someone to lead that, and I will make Chris a leader on the committee. For now, I submitted the request to give us the Senior Squadron of the Year award. We are typically applying for that year after year, and we have some significant milestones in this year. We have flown a lot of cadets. We have built our membership significantly, helped in other areas at the group level and at the wing level. So we'll see if that goes well. I personally submitted 3 other member awards, member-specific awards. There is no guarantee those will be granted because those will compete against other member of the year type of awards. But a quick reminder, you don't have to really go directly through our awards committee if you want to nominate someone. Once you see the group level request, you can nominate any CEP member at any level if you feel like they went above and beyond an organization. You just have to use proper form. It's form 120. Write it up and submit up through the ranks. Any questions? All right. Quick update on carpet replacement. Well, I just reiterate what I have stated last time. We expect that to take place any moment. As soon as the carpet is purchased, the vendor was already selected, and hopefully it will be done. For the Nighthawk, I invited the airport manager and his assistant manager. I also extended the invitation to any other airport management personnel. I asked them to RSVP, and hopefully they will. So far I didn't hear from them. But the assistant manager is on vacation through the end of the month, so probably he's not going to make it. I also invited the tower personnel. No response yet, but they're usually busy. He's typically responding, but not immediately after I reach out to them. Riverside Flight Academy promised they will actually buy food for everyone attending the Nighthawk. So because we gave them an opportunity to use our facility while there was a repair going on at their roof. So they want to show their gratitude, and we'll see how that goes. The head of the company asked how many people will attend, so please RSVP. I can report the head count to RFA. That's all on my side. Any questions? All right. Any ideas what we want to talk about today? Chris is dealing with damaged fence, apparently, and Michelle is recovering from flu or cold, so they are not attending. That's his night, and I came unprepared.
Did you see the, there was some more info about the Truckee Challenger jet crash?
Yeah, there was a study on that published. Would you like maybe?
It's CRM based. That's why I thought I'd make a good topic.
Definitely. Would you like to start?
Sure.
CRM is always a good topic. Similar topic is FedEx crash in Hawaii.
Oh,
where
yeah.
They
Mhm.
crash landed it on the
CRM
water.
as well.
There was strictly CRM. They shut down the good engine. They reported both engine failure, and the main reason for their failure to identify the proper engine was they were deeply involved in discussing another crew member, and they were very emotional about it. So they missed a lot of checklist items to begin with, and when they got the engine issue, they actually missed the steps in troubleshooting checklist and shut down the good one. Interesting enough, there was another incident in Hawaii in a similar way. I forgot the local airline, also a cargo airline involved in it a few years ago. Similar scenario. They misidentified the engine and shut it down. Unless the mentor pilot, for whatever reason, reported the airline instead of FedEx. Although FedEx was Boeing aircraft and the other company was different aircraft. Older one, I think was 727 cargo.
Well, there's a procedure that American Airlines always did. So the captain pulled the throttle on the engine that was failing. And it'd either be confirmed if you had a crew of 3. The engineer, first officer, would confirm that was the number and point to the TAC to confirm. The engineer would then shut off the fuel. But I don't know, a lot of people get in a hurry to start shutting things down, and they end up doing the wrong one. They just grab to shut the mixture off without pulling the throttle back for identification. You're gonna get in trouble every time.
Right. Yeah, well, CRM and checklist, 2 key items.
Well, unfortunately, when you have an engine failure, there's no checklist, it's all memory, rote memory. They're
Memory
called the red
items.
box. And that should be rote memory for everything.
Well, for troubleshooting, there should be, right? So first of all, there is a memory item process, and then if you have ability and enough altitude and time, then you can revert to checklist. But if it's low altitude and time critical scenario, committing to memory the most critical items is extremely important.
But in multi-engine, if you step on the rudder, maintain your heading, you know that that engine's operating. Because you're trying to keep that wing down. If you push on the other rudder, it's gonna go inverted. It means that you got the wrong engine. So your foot tells you what engine is operating. The one that doesn't have any pressure on is the engine that failed, especially in multi-engine.
Right. Yeah, the issue with transport local airline in Hawaii was the engine didn't fail completely. It lost a significant amount of power, about 50%, because of the multiple blades cracked and started interfering with operation. So the EGTs went up, but they somehow they pulled the throttle, which dropped the EGTs down, and then they couldn't identify the proper engine. The mentor pilot has a very good breakdown on chain of events, and it's pretty eye-opening in terms of CRM specifically. And FedEx incident is very similar, but it's more about distraction in the cockpit and not really being focused on the job. And then they try to cover up their tracks, actually, by blaming the other engine. They claimed that it failed, but then the black box research identified that it was operating perfectly. They just shut down.
If you got a compressor stall, which I'd had in a DC-10 going into Toronto, it's pretty hard to identify. All you're doing is you're getting a choo-choo out of it. And that was choo-choo. So if you bring back one at a time, and it stops, or you start pushing the throttle up, and it starts getting worse, that becomes the engine that's got a fuel controller that's causing the issue. What I did, because it was snowing, I kept that engine running at idle, because I needed the electricity I'd rather have the generator and the hydraulics in operation at a low power with the other two operating than to try and shut it down. So I kept mine running. But it's very hard to isolate. And you'll see, like the news the other day, flames shooting out of this thing, of which they turned around, went back to LA. That's a choo-choo. It's a compressor stall. So compressor stall builds up, fuel increases in the chambers, and then it blows out the back on fire. And they think the engine's coming apart or it's burning, but it's really the fuel controller that's causing it all. It's just
excessive
choo-chooing.
fuel burns out, or what happens?
Yeah, the fuel will come out the exhaust, so you'll get a flame out the exhaust. You'll go out 6 feet.
Looks great for
And then it
passengers.
dissipates, and then it comes back out again.
Mm-hmm.
What's the fuel flow doing in these cases?
It's all generated from, the fuel flow will stay there where it is, because the throttle controls where the lever is gonna be and how much fuel is gonna be input. So the fuel controller, if it's got a bad fuel controller, it's got, we'll say some of the ports in there are blocked or something, even though you may have the throttle up, you'll get into a compressor stall.
Hey, I got a question.
Sure.
When the Ukraine gets their F-16s, how are they going to protect them on the ground?
Well, the problem is Ukraine doesn't control their airspace,
Right.
and they don't
F-16s
have
are the wrong
adequate
aircraft.
airfields to operate F-16s.
F-16s are the wrong aircraft for Ukraine.
So it's going
So-
to be really a failure, in my opinion.
So is there an answer for that? In other words, the Russians can just throw missiles at them until they get them all.
And that's exactly what the Russians are going to do. So the whole thing about F-16s is more of a political game than real benefit to Ukraine.
Yep.
So they're not gonna protect them on the ground.
Or they'll have some kind
Be very difficult.
of radar system.
Who can name one issue with F-16s operationally? Single issue. The location of the engine. It needs a perfect runway.
Well, yeah.
You cannot have any debris on the runway to operate. Ukraine doesn't have those kind of airfields. In operational radius where it will make a difference.
That's where the A-10 had its advantage. Engine set up pretty high.
Yeah.
You can get
Well,
in and out of anything they
Well,
want.
I watched a pretty long, or lengthy, as a defense analyst, was a UK guy, but he was talking about how if you actually wanted to help them significantly, the F-16 is the wrong aircraft, and in fact, no U.S.-based aircraft are not really the best ones for them. The best aircraft would be the Gripen. But the problem is that's politically an invalid decision because they're not going to give away the Gripen. But the Gripen is UK based or Europe based. It's designed to be maintained by people who are relatively new and conscripted into service. You know, you don't need a bunch of specialists. So the F-16, in addition to the fact you can't fly it from an improved runway, you need specialists to maintain it. You need to have the ability to handle hazardous materials because it has hydrogen on board. You know, there's a whole bunch of reasons why the F-16 would be an aircraft once you've established air superiority and you've got active combat air patrols, but not for what the war in Ukraine is. Like it's not an aircraft designed for that. So, and they don't seem to be rolling them out at any decent speed. So,
How about Harriers? They could operate off field.
I mean, Harriers would be a better choice, but nobody's making Harriers anymore. So,
And training aircrew could probably going to be a
Oh.
bit of an issue.
yeah, any VTOL aircraft, the training curve is extreme.
Yeah. So Chris, are you ready with your?
Well,
idea?
you know, yeah, I mean, all I wanted to talk about was, well, in all these CRM-based incidents, that is kind of the deal. But if I start with, I'll just read the Aviation Safety Network, you know, findings because they haven't added much.
Would
But
you like to share the teams?
oh, do we? Should we? Or
Yeah, we have well, Lon and Roger online.
Okay. Let's see.
Or you
Share
can
from
maybe
here.
you can send me the link and I over airdrop.
Maybe. We'll see.
Let's see. That's me. We can share that. To find among gazillion of the room.
I don't think you have enough windows open.
I'll just share the whole screen. And that makes it easy.
Okay, so these are the stats. You can go to Aviation Safety Network and see this for yourself if you can't read what's on the screen. But basically the summary of it was they were a Bombardier Challenger 605 flying Part 91, not flying a charter. And, you know, they should, well, I mean, I'll get into that in a second, but they ended up flying a circling approach into runway 11. And as we know, and I think at the time of this accident as well, circling approaches have been kind of identified as 25 times more risky than a straight-in precision approach. So why they would have elected to do a circling approach, we don't know. Pilots are dead, so we can't ask them. When the RNAV for runway, I think it was, I have it up here, the RNAV for runway 20 or the RNAV for runway 11 were both available, and there was limited visibility. So, you know, why did they select that particular approach? We don't know. Now, what's interesting is we all thought this is just sad, circling. They entered just, you know, the narrative of the crash here. It was destroyed when it impacted heavily wooded terrain while on a visual approach to runway 11 near Truckee Airport, Truckee, California. I find this a little near and dear to my heart because I used to work in Truckee, California, and the company I worked for, we had a backup facility on the airport, so I know the area fairly well. But this is well before I started flying. 2 pilots and 4 passengers were fatally injured. Flight crew established communication with the Truckee Tower controller when they were near the Lumo waypoint, located about 9.6 nautical miles north of the approach end of the runway 20. The tower controller offered the flight crew the option of crossing over the field and enter the left downwind leg for runway 29 or enter the downwind leg for runway 11. Once the flight crew announced they were making a right turn and reported runway 11 in sight, the controller then cleared them to land on runway 11 and informed them that the airplane, I guess they mean the airport, was not in sight. The flight crew acknowledged the clearance, which was their final communication. According to witnesses, the airplane was in a nose-down attitude and steep left turn during its last few seconds of flight. The aircraft struck trees and then the ground. The aircraft was consumed by post-crash fire. The probable cause of the incident, and I think this is still the initial, even though they do have some more information nowadays. The first officer's improper decision to attempt to salvage an unstabilized approach by executing a steep left turn to realign the airplane with the runway centerline, and the captain's failure to intervene after recognizing the FO's erroneous action, while both ignored stall protection system warnings, which resulted in a left wing stall and impact with terrain. Contributing to the accident was the FO's improper deployment of the flight spoilers, which decreased the airplane's stall margin, the captain's improper setup of the circling approach, and the flight crew's self-induced pressure to perform and poor crew resource management, which degrade their decision making. So that's the part I want to address. So there's a lot of in the probable cause up in the top section, but now that they've recovered some voice recorder information, there are some interesting facts about this flight. One of the facts was even though you had a captain and an FO, the captain had significantly less time in type and significantly less time as a pilot than the FO. The FO was a contract pilot who had not been fully hired by the company yet, so that's probably why he was in the first officer position. We're not really sure at this time who was actually pilot monitoring and pilot flying, but we're fairly certain that the captain was pilot flying and the FO was pilot monitoring. So it's interesting that they say the FO's improper decision to salvage an unstabilized approach, but I'll get to that in a second. So you've got a captain with relatively low time and type. You've got an FO who is extremely experienced, and from all indicators for this entire flight, was acting as an instructor, because based on the voice recorder inputs, he was doing a lot of correcting the captain's decisions. And as they were shooting this approach, they noticed a bunch of things. They had talked about they were going to do the RNAV straight-in precision approach, but then they decided to do the circling approach. But they didn't brief the circling approach, which, for those of you who are RIF already know this, standard practice is the crew will brief the approach they're going to do and how they're going to shoot it, so that we are all on the same mental picture as we're coming into an airport, so that we can start calling out things that are not right. Well, no briefing. So they go into a circling approach. When they left the hold, they had not set the appropriate speed, and the FO called this out, saying, we're way over speed. Would you want to do a 360 while we slow our airspeed? Captain never acknowledges this call out and request. So now they're entering a circling approach at above the speed that they should be. And then it starts to kind of go downhill from here, because what you start to hear is a bunch of prompts from the FO, like, let me get that speed for you, which we believe, based on the data, that he reduced throttles and activated the flight spoilers, which increased the descent rate significantly. This particular approach is a circling approach, has very high minimums, so it's very likely that you would be high and hot, coming off this circling approach. This didn't help because now you've got this incredible descent rate and you've lost a little bit of power, so that's a whole other issue altogether. I'm not a jet pilot, but I understand that that's probably a bad configuration to be in. I wouldn't necessarily call that stabilized, and in a circling approach, how stabilized can you actually be? The FO called for an early rollout when they were doing their circling, which was odd. So they weren't really truly aligned with a good downwind for the runway. That would have required a more steep turn to the left to realign for the runway. And they're still over speed. They're still not in full landing configuration. According to the inputs on the aircraft, they had flaps 45 in the downwind, which according to their standard operating procedures was allowed, but the standard operating procedures was for 30 degrees of flaps. So why did they select 45? Probably, again, descent rate, right? So you've got this back and forth going between the first officer and the captain, and like I said, the first officer a little more experienced, and in fact more experienced across multiple types of aircraft. So he had a glider license, he was a CFII, I think he had 14,000 hours of total flight experience, and a lot of them were instructive, where the captain had it somewhere, I want to say he had something around 5,700 and only about 200 hours in that particular type of aircraft. So, what we're also thinking is that pressure to perform. He's acting as the captain and PIC of this flight. There's a little bit of ego probably involved in this. You've got a super experienced guy sitting in the right seat. He's giving you prompts, and you're ignoring these prompts. And in fact, one of the last prompts, as the captain's cranking down on this turn that they're clearly going to miss, the stick shaker goes off, which is the first warning of stalls in most jets. The captain does not respond to the stick shaker. The first officer says, "What are you doing?" The stick shaker stops, then re-engages, and now you get the stall warning horn, and the left wing goes and stalls, and they go into an aerodynamic stall on the left wing. spin, and crash. And what was interesting is nobody, especially the first officer, who probably had a very good picture of what was going on and knew that things weren't going right, the reason they cite him as improper decision to continue unstabilized approach is because he clearly should have said my controls and, you know, did a go around. What we did hear on the voice recorder data was he asked for controls. He said, would you like me to take over? And the captain never responded to this request. So you're starting to get a picture of the captain was a little less inexperienced and started to get the fixation on, I'm just going to get this plane down, instead of taking a step back. He's getting a lot of prompting from his other crew member and saying, yeah, maybe we should just go around and reconfigure and, you know, circle until we, you know, figure this out. Which, you know, I'm not the most experienced pilot. I'm a very new pilot. But I've had situations where I didn't like what was happening, and I just said, yeah, I'm going around now. And the very experienced pilot sitting next to me, he said, yeah, that's all good. And then, you know, we went around, came out, did a nice, beautiful landing. And he said, well, why'd you go around? I said, I didn't feel good. Like, I know how to land my aircraft, and I was getting all bad cues as I approached the round out. And he's like, you know, you could have just taken a little bit of throttle out and brought the nose up. But he's like, the fact that you brought it around and did a nice landing, I'm all good. We're all here, right? And it really reinforced the lesson of, if you don't feel good, just go around. You know, and there's a whole song about that. Yes.
Does the Challenger require a type rating?
I believe it does, because it is both a turbofan and multi-engine.
So then the captain had accomplished his type rating.
Yes.
And how about a Part 135 check ride?
Well, so this flight
That's
was
all part of
operated under Part 91.
I know, but it's a professional airplane.
Mhm.
Probably has to operate under Part 135.
According to they checked the pilots, you know, credentials. Both pilots were fully credentialed to operate that aircraft in Part 135. Apparently, the captain had obviously completed his Part 135 check ride, which included a non-precision approach, a hold, and, you know, some emergency procedures. So, you know, but again, this gets into, it doesn't matter how much experience you have or don't have. Decision making is something, and especially when you have multiple crew in the flight deck, I think we should all be somewhat aligned with the plan, and if something goes outside of that plan, we should, you know, somebody has to make the call. Now, you know, I was thinking about this on the way, because, you know, I've flown with Andre, I've flown with Terry, I've flown with a lot of very experienced pilots, and I've never been in a position where I'm like, well, I don't like what's going on. But it made me think about, what if I actually saw something that I didn't like? I would have a way to vocalize it, you know, not in a very, you know, frightened and screaming way. I just go, this doesn't look good, are you okay? Which the response would be, yeah, we're all good. And that's about what I can do. But if I see him, like, you know, going full throttle on short final and, you know, about to auger the plane in, I'll grab controls and cover his eyes and and try to pull us out of the dive. But, you know, it definitely brought up, you know, and you know, with the whole CRM thing is these situations where you get, you know, unequal experience in the flight deck, and somebody actually needs to take some sort of control who knows what's going on, and they don't do it. And, you know, whether the FO, because he's a contract pilot, he's just trying to land his job, and, you know, telling the captain he doesn't know how to fly an aircraft, it's probably not going to go so well for him trying to apply for this job, factored a probably a lot into he's seeing a bunch of cues about this guy's not ready for this particular landing at this particular airport on this particular day for whatever reason. And instead of saying my controls forcefully and, you know, getting them out of a bad situation, he rode it all the way to the ground. You know, why did he do that? And, you know, we'll never know. But as they start looking at it, you know, there's a number of different, you know, the dangerous attitudes that were taught in flight school. You can see where a number of them are violated. You know, you've got pressure to perform, you've got, you know, ego or loss of face. You know, I mean, you've got all these things going on, and it ended up in a tragic accident for this crew and the passengers, and it all falls back to, you know, and we don't always get to pick. I mean, in this particular case, that crew didn't get to pick who flew with who, you know, I mean, and the airlines are very much the same way, where captains have some discretion over who they fly with, but as a first officer, you just show up.
Why
And
were they flying under Part 91 with passengers?
repositioning,
Hmm?
just repositioning.
Oh.
Now, they had passengers, so, but it's perfectly legal to reposition the aircraft with passengers on board. The key was it was a non-revenue flight, so.
Right alongs.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, it's an interesting, and I just, you know, bring it up as a discussion point, like, you know, I'm so new to this that I have the advantage and disadvantage of the advantages of I'm recently trained, all the rules are fairly new and fresh to me, but also I don't know all the situations that are dangerous, right? So if I was sitting in a jet, like obviously I don't know what's going on in a jet other than basic piloting, like this seems bad and the stick moving and shaking probably isn't good either, right? We should push the nose, right? But you know, the fact that these two experienced pilots, and it's not just these two, you know, there's many flight crews that have cues that things are going bad and they don't take action. And it's interesting because I was actually, and Bob, I've heard you say many times, no, I'm not doing that, and you know, and I'm going to take charge because we're doing things badly here. Was that the general rule back then, and has that changed nowadays? Or
Before we even got into CRM, I can remember flying an approach first officer 707. We were going into Cincinnati. It was an ice field. And I said, if I get down here and I don't like it, I'm just going to go around. And everybody says, sounds fine to me. There was another time, I said, the captain had been off for 45 days, going into Dulles in a snowstorm, lined up left, out of so many feet, lined up left, out of so many feet, lined up left, lined up left.
I take
finally
it the
yelled,
third one was right?
I got the airplane, I hit the throttles, and there was nothing he could do about it, because we were at full power on a go-around. He got all ticked off. We actually straddled the edge lights. By the time the thing pitched up, the wheels hit, and we just bounced up.
No. What
And
do
he
you
was
think
gonna
it
get
is?
in there, heck or high water, and then then when the airplane got grounded, because the skin on one of the doors was peeled back, and he had a hot date in New York. It was tough.
Now,
So you have to,
how does
you
that?
can't be, you have to be aggressive in some cases. But if the individual's not responding,
That's what I was going to ask. Like,
if the individual's not responding and you keep saying something, you just yell out, go around and hit the throttles. You can hit it. Better get chewed out than to kill yourself, which they did.
Well, actually, it's a good point because I think once you go, like you hit the toga button, there's not really much he can do. Like, I mean, he could do bad things, but the plane is now going to do missed, like whether he wants
it's
to or
coupled.
not.
If it's coupled.
Mm.
On a
Yeah,
coupled
they
approach.
were doing a circling, so.
So
maybe
if you're
not.
on a circling approach, you probably aren't gonna have that on. You may have auto throttles, you may have,
Mm.
that's about it. But you're not gonna be in a coupled approach. So when you hit the toga button
Mm.
and the pitch bar goes up, the nose goes up. and
If you're coupled.
Yeah, on a coupled. And
But at least the flight director will tell you that you should pull back if you're uncoupled, right? Like I think now we get the little chevrons, so the chevrons
no,
will move
that's
up.
not gonna, yeah, because it's taking its information from the approach guys.
Mm.
So if I'm on an ILS, those chevrons are gonna tell me where the localizer is and where my glide slope is. And it will direct me to that point. But if I'm on a VFR, hand-flown approach, the chevron isn't gonna do very much except for maybe what my airspeed is.
Mm. So really, the best thing is really just go full throttle because then his choices are very limited on what he can actually do.
Now,
at
once you
that
go
point.
full throttle,
Yeah.
and the engines, let's see, on that one there, the engines are in the rear. On a 707 DC-10, they're under the wing, so the wing, you've got moment arms, so therefore the nose pitches up and you're already committed. On this one here, the way it is, it's almost considered an inline thrust aircraft
Because they're so close.
because they're
inboard.
close to the fuselage,
Mm.
so it becomes an inline thrust. So you push on the throttles and it keeps in the same direction.
Mm.
So you gotta take and operate a pitch bar with a pitch of the yoke to get it to climb.
Boo.
So
But
it
yeah,
sounds like the first officer, right, and the captain was just saying, screw you, I'm the captain, but he's not responding.
yeah, the
The
fact
first
that,
officer says,
yeah.
why don't you give me the controls and let you and settle down a little bit and let's go back and start all over.
Right.
If anybody in a cockpit says, I don't like what's going on, even in the Civil Air Patrol, in all my briefings, if you don't like what's going on, we're going home.
Right.
Or we're gonna get out of this situation.
Well, we
We're
call
gonna
it,
go up
yeah.
and we're gonna go into a holding pattern.
We call knock it off, and we're done.
And-
Yeah.
And the same thing, most airlines, this is probably a charter. Is it a charter outfit?
Well, it's a charter outfit, but yeah.
Yeah, so even then, some of the extensive training that they get, it may not be quite as much as an airline would do.
But they have, I mean, and I heard this mentioned these findings are, they haven't fully updated these yet, but I kept hearing mention of the standard operating procedures, because they're a Part 135 carrier, so they do have procedures that are supposed to be followed. But it seems like they had a little more leeway, I guess, I don't know, because it's 135.
Well, the airlines are under Part 121 and 135, they're under both.
Mhm.
You got more responsibility when you got 200-300 people sitting in the back row,
Absolutely.
you know, than versus having 8 people in the airplane.
Yeah.
You know, oh, we'll get there. It's the same thinking that the guy had at French Valley. Yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can do it. I mean,
Yeah,
it was
that
pretty
one-
stupid on the first go-around. On the first go-around, when he didn't see anything, he should have made his decision what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
Instead of that, he said, well, let's do this again. I mean, there's nothing in the rule book says you can shoot 100 approaches
Mhm.
and not see the runway. But somewhere along the line, out of that 100, you're gonna have that 1% of
Well,
a failure.
I heard a really good, you know, as far as like going missed and bad conditions. So if you're on a practice approach, that's one thing. But this was, the French Valley one was IMC, definitely, that they didn't really expect. But one thing they said, because I always wondered that too, is like, how many times are you going to shoot this approach? He's like, well, if the weather's improving, and you know, and you have good evidence that the weather's improving, yeah, go ahead and shoot the approach again. But they're like, the other thing to take into consideration that I never thought about was how well did you fly the approach? If you flew the approach needle centered and you couldn't get down below minimums, then it's probably not going to improve enough. You know, if you flew the approach and you were above the glide slope and you're a little bit off, like, okay, you could account for the fact that maybe you didn't fly the approach really well and that's why you didn't get your visibility in time. But, you know, I was like, yeah, it's, I mean, for me, it's, if it's in IMC and I flew a perfect approach, it's probably not going to improve enough on the next
What was
approach.
the weather in Truckee?
The weather was actually good. Let me see.
So the good breakdown on this incident, I finally remembered where I've heard about it. It was on Aviation News Podcast, one of the most recent episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And Rob Magada gave Max Trescott gave a pretty good breakdown on what was going on. One
Mm-hmm.
pointer he made, the first officer was actually giving training to the captain.
Mm-hmm.
And giving the training, he should have executed the authority, being an instructor, and take over the command early in the game. But for whatever reason, he was in denial and he didn't act aggressively enough to take over the controls.
So what was the weather?
I think the only thing that was poor visibility due to fire smoke.
There was
That's
a
what I
fire.
remember.
There was smoke from the fires in the area,
Mhm.
but the visibility was reasonable and wasn't the real factor.
And what time was it?
Does it say?
Yeah,
It
afternoon.
was
Afternoon or daylight?
18. Yep. Yeah, I've got the main report pulled up over here. And yeah, as far as pilot information, captain, had airline transport pilot, multi-engine, no instructor rating, had a class 1 medical, 5,700 hours, 230 in that make and model. 3,000 hours piloting command. And the co-pilot, ATP, flight instructor, multi, glider, instructor for both single engine instrument, 14,000 hours total, 4,400 hours time and type, 8,000 hours piloting command. So the first officer had a significantly more experience, both in that aircraft and flying in general, and was an instructor. I'm still looking, oh, here we go. It was VMC conditions, daytime, so, you know, this was around 1350, so 150 in the afternoon. It was broken, 2300, 16 knots of, 11 knots, 16 knot gust. Visibility was 4 miles, so that was due to smoke. Yeah, precipitation, obscuration, none, but there was smoke in the area. There was, the aircraft was clear, or the flight was cleared IFR. Yeah, it wasn't a whole lot. Yeah, and then like I said, at least it looks like the report has all the updated information. So the communication between the two is what is the filler information on this. Yeah, that's pretty interesting here, because let's see if I scan through. Yeah, visibility may be different. Do you have anything to tag on? Or okay. Let's see. They asked for clearance to proceed direct. At 12:55, the FO asked ATC if they could proceed direct to the waypoint Alant for the RNAV GPS approach to runway 11 at Truckee. The controller cleared them as requested. At about 12:58, the airplane descended below 26,000 feet. ATC informed the crew that they could expect RNAV GPS runway 20. The captain informed the first officer that runway 20 was too short and they cannot accept that, and added that runway 20 approach would require them to circle to land for runway 11. Oh, so this is even more complicated, where you're circling to land a different runway than you're putting down on. Yeah, I've read about how dangerous that is. The FO then computed the required landing distance and concluded runway 20 was 4,655 feet long. And they required a minimum landing distance of 4,600 feet. The captain noted the margin was too tight, and the FO agreed with this assessment. So they said they would make a circle to land. This is where it gets weird. So they decided they'd make an approach into runway 20 and circle to land. 15 seconds later, the FO informed ATC that they could take runway 20 approach, but would need to circle to runway 11 because they needed the longer runway. The controller approved their request and told them to plan on the circling approach, then told them to expect some delays. The flight crew did not brief this new approach, which was required by the descent checklist, because the flight crew had changed their approach after briefing the original approach. FO asked the controller if they should enter the published hold, but the controller instructed the flight crew to expect a hold at a different waypoint, an initial approach fix. Okay. So the FO then helped the captain program to the FMS. So after they were cleared for the approach, the FO asked, and the captain confirmed that he was ready for the approach. The FO provided an abbreviated readback of the clearance. The FO asked the captain, "Are you going to be able to get down?" According to the ADS-B data, the aircraft was at an altitude of 15,725 feet MSL. And time of the first altitude approach was 12,000 feet MSL, about 3 miles away. So, yeah, they had to lose
$6 grand.
Yeah, well, they had to lose just about 3,000 feet in 3 miles. So that's a little tight. FO then stated to the captain, "We've got a ways to go. You've got plenty of time. About this time, the flight data recorder showed the aircraft indicated airspeed was at 241 knots. FO said, "We've got to get this thing slowed down," then asked if the captain wanted a right 360 turn, but the captain declined. The airplane was about 3 miles south of Awega, heading toward Osity at a airspeed of 252 knots. Osity is
So he's 3 miles from the airport, he's still at 250, 240?
Well, they said, so he's at 252 knots. Ostai, I guess it's Ostai. Ostai is about 2 nautical miles north of Lumo, the final approach fix. So yeah, it's real tight. Captain instructed the FO, now just below 250, give me flaps 20, please. However, the FO responded, below 250? How about below 230? Consistent with the published flap speeds of 231 knots in the manufacturer's operating manual that was also placarded in the aircraft. And the captain agreed. The FO then stated again that they should start slowing down the airplane. A few seconds later, the controller terminated radar services and asked the flight crew to contact Truckee Tower. When the airspeed was about 228 knots, Captain asked the FO to deploy flaps 20, which the FO stated had been selected, and the flight data recorder showed the flap setting was 4 seconds later. At the same time, the FO contacted Truckee Tower and informed them they were passing the final approach fix inbound and would circle to land runway 11. The tower acknowledged the communication and asked them to report when the airport was in sight. Captain asked the FO to deploy the landing gear, and the FO responded, "You came off, what are you, never mind," and then said, "How about gear down flaps 30 before landing checklist?" The captain then asked the FO again to deploy the landing gear. So we're starting to hear where the breakdowns are occurring. Flaps were at 30, the landing gear was down. The captain asked for flaps 30 please, and the FO responded, "No, we're at flaps 30, gear down." The captain then immediately restated flaps 30. About 15 seconds later, the captain asked the FO to confirm the airport's location on the left. The FO confirmed the airport's location, then added, "We're going to have to make a right-hand turn to get to it." And the captain acknowledged him. The FO stated the airport was 5 miles away. The FO deployed full flaps 45 degrees after confirming with the captain. A second later, near the Yaku waypoint, the FO said, "There's the airport," told the captain to make a 90-degree right turn and contact the Truckee Tower, which cleared the airplane to land. The FO attempted to point out the airport to the captain, and the captain asked, "Where?" twice.
Alex, call you back.
The FO told the captain to roll out, level the wings, stopping the turn, and turn the autopilot off, so decoupled. The airplane was at the beginning of the downwind length turn, about 213 degrees magnetic, when the FO told the captain to roll out, and the airplane rolled out on a heading of 233. There are pictures of this, by the way, so get those in there. Oh, you might be able to pull it up here. Yeah. Well, you can, yeah, it's in the report. Yeah, you're good. Anyways, Figure 2 depicts the turns made by the airplane and the maximum circling radius of 3 nautical miles allowed for Category C aircraft at Truckee Airport's approach charts. The airplane was at least 1.3 nautical miles from that maximum circling radius. The FO told the captain, "I'm going to get your speed under control for you." Flight data recorder indicated the airplane's airspeed was about 162 knots at this time. Flight data recorder showed that the airplane began to slow after the FO made this statement. The captain stated, "Oh, I see the runway," when the airplane had already started circling approach to runway 11. If I'm not mistaken, circling approach requires constant visual contact with the runway, so that's interesting that you didn't see it till then. 2 seconds later, the FO told the captain he could start descending, and the captain replied, "K, full flaps." The FO replied, "You do have full flaps," and then stated, "Patience, patience, patience. You've got all the time in the world." 13 seconds later, he stated, "You're looking very good, my friend." The airspeed was about 123 knots, and the airplane was on a west heading of about 1.5 miles from the approach end of runway 11 when the FO told the captain to bring that turn around, and the aircraft began a left turn toward the runway. As the airplane was turning through a heading of 188, the FO made the first of several requests for control of the airplane, asking the captain, "Let me see the airplane for a second." 8 seconds later, FO told the captain, "We're going to go through it, the runway center line, and come back to the center line, okay?" The captain acknowledged the FO. The airplane flew through runway 11, extended center line about 0.8 miles from the runway threshold. Flight data recorder showed the flight spoilers were fully deployed at the time. Airspeed was 135 knots. The N1 had reduced from about 60% RPM to about 28% RPM. That sounds bad. The FO said, "We are very high." The airplane was at 6,390 feet, or about 489 feet above the runway 11 threshold. The airplane began a left turn that reached a bank angle of 36 degrees about 4 seconds later. According to the cockpit voice recorder data, the stick shaker engaged at this time at 13:18:04. The captain asked, "What are you doing?" Captain thinks that the FO is trying to take the controls, which was followed by a stall warning sound. The airplane was on a south heading about 0.75 nautical miles from the runway threshold as it continued to turn back toward the runway center line. The stick pusher engaged again 1 second later. The captain again asked the FO, "What are you doing?" The FO then asked the captain 3 times over 2 seconds to let me have the airplane. The stick pusher disengaged 2 seconds later, immediately followed by the stick shaker disengaging. I think he meant the alarm disengaging. The stick shaker engaged again 2 seconds later, immediately followed by the stick pusher engaging, and the airplane was about 6,075 feet MSL in a southwesterly heading when it entered a rapid left roll. The airplane was in a 111 left wing low bank angle, and 1 second later it was in a 146 degree right wing low bank angle at approximately a 30% nose low altitude just before the airplane impacted terrain. So, I mean, the final seconds of that flight was the first officer trying to get control of the aircraft.
And the captain fighting him.
Well, it's undetermined if the FO was fighting him, because what the cockpit voice recorder records is the stick shaker and stick pusher working. So the captain was stalling the aircraft, and the aircraft was trying to save itself. I think the FO, sounds like he was pretty professional, wasn't grabbing the controls, because he would have throttled up, as you said. He just would have went full throttle, and they hopefully wouldn't have stalled, but they were down to 28% N1 with spoilers out, full flaps.
Why are the spoilers out? I couldn't understand why the
The
spoilers were
FO
out.
pulled the spoilers out because I think in his mind they were high and fast, and he wanted to increase the descent angle. That's what
But they
everybody.
never,
I
they
think that's
never
the only word.
retracted them.
He never retracted them. Which
That's one issue.
and there was just another crash in Pakistan that was exactly that. Like, instead of deploying like the flaps, they deployed spoilers and forgot about them or something like that and fell out of the sky.
But it sounds like they were behind the 8 ball most of the way.
I think they were
And
behind
then
the
they
eight
didn't
ball.
get down to the final checklist, and then they deployed the spoilers, and then of course the spoilers are losing lift at 36 degrees.
Oh, I think, and also the fact that at no time, I mean, like the FO, he sees it going on, and he never just said, "Go around," which I think may have snapped him out, like snapped the captain out of his, fixation on trying to get the plane down. I mean, I remember as a student, every time I heard "go around," it, I mean, no matter what else I was doing, I didn't fly the plane. Like,
Well, as you mentioned, there are multiple factors here, and short flight allocation is one of them. We're gonna get there.
yeah, it's no big
But
deal.
even though the captain, what did he have, how many hours?
The captain had 5,700 hours total.
Even, that doesn't really make him a good captain, really.
Well, I think we all know that now. Unfortunately.
There was unfortunately somewhat similar accident at Teterboro,
Yeah.
New Jersey.
Very
short
similar.
relocation flight, 2 people on board, captain and first officer, and captain was giving an instruction to the first officer. That was the opposite situation. Both of them were not good pilots. They had poor record with airlines they flew for. So,
But the other key thing is visibility. There's airborne visibility and tower visibility.
right.
Now, with March Field, they know that if they look out the tower and they can see where the National Cemetery is, they got so much visibility. And yet they can call IFR conditions. One morning I'm going into work and I'm flying in. I'm at 2 miles out and I can read the runway. And I said, for your information, I'm reading the numbers right now on the runway. Well, we're still IFR. I said, well, someone better make a change. Then when I get down there, I call the weather guys, and they says, well, we got 2. There's tower visibility and then what we measure going straight up.
Yeah.
You know, so with smoke, we know that it's gonna be airborne. It may be clear on the ground, and yet you'll be in pretty poor visibility airborne.
Now, biggest mistake they made, they tried to salvage unstable approach.
Yeah.
They were past the center line and tried to bank into it, like driving a car.
But the only way you can get down is to slow down.
Yeah.
So if you slow down, gear down, and flaps, you can descend pretty well. But you gotta do it further out, and you have to level off to do it so that when you get down, you have a stabilized approach going into the airfield. You can do it. I've done it in the DC-10. And you get down, and yeah.
I mean,
Give me the gear.
the part that I'm still confused about is why they chose a circling approach to runway 11 when there is a published RNAV for runway 11.
Yeah, the same question was from Max Trescott. So circling approach by itself is dangerous, but if you have safer options, why not using them?
Yeah, I mean, this
I
is in the
think
mountains.
The
like-
breakdown happened a lot earlier in the game when they selected the wrong approach and they didn't really think through. They didn't properly brief it, and well, they paid their lives and passengers' lives for that. The AOPA's Air Safety Institute has a video called Just a Short Flight, I think. It's about the Teterboro incident. A relocation flight. It's sad. They in the same fashion, they missed the center line and they tried salvage the landing, banked too hard and crashed.
This is Roger speaking. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. It amazes me in these kind of things because for the 30 years I flew for the Air Force, we had been just about in every kind of situation you could think of. I mean, incredible situations that you would just sit there. I've been hit with hail, all that kind of stuff, and landing at pure total whiteout in the South Pole, all those things. And yet, never we ever got into a situation where we even came close to crashing. And it was amazing to me that you read these kind of things like this happening, and you just like go, wow, I mean, the difference I see is the professionalism. In the Air Force, it was always, no matter what the crew was doing, they were professional about what they were doing. And it was incredible. We always came out and walked out on the other end without dinging a wingtip or anything, And there was only one time where I ever saw it kind of break down for a couple of minutes, and that was when we were landing at McMurdo Station in the South Pole, and it was a total whiteout completely. And the guy flying the airplane would not stopped descending the airplane when the co-pilot and the third pilot were telling him, no, you do not have the runway in sight. It was all total white. He thought he did. And he kept descending until finally, all of a sudden, the black flag showed up on the white, on the end of the runway. But that was the only time I ever saw where there was an actual situation. And Bob knew that guy who flew the airplane. He was a safety officer at March Field later on. But anyhow, yeah, it was amazing. I see these accidents and I go, oh my gosh, I went through 30 years of landing in weird situations everywhere around the world, and yet never had an incident like that.
Well, to tell you the other interesting fact, because you get on the right-hand side of the Aviation Safety Foundation, you get some stats on the number of aircraft and how many losses they've had. It's interesting. This is still, it is 1.3% of the aircraft built, this particular aircraft, that have had a fatal accident. So it's always sad when it happens, but it's like it just shows how well trained most crews are. That planes aren't just randomly falling out of the sky. Like it's a very uncommon event.
True. So I posted that accident case study in the chat. That's AOPA video called "Just a Short Flight." It's very eye-opening how just a short flight can lead to unnecessary problems. All right. Well, thank you, Roger, for your information. I appreciate the insight. Any questions, comments? Okay, then we'll call it a day. Thank you very much, everybody who attended. Have a good night.
Night.